They say weddings bring people together. But that night, beneath the golden string lights and the clink of champagne glasses, something inside me finally broke. And I think I left a piece of myself on the polished floor of that lakeside venue. It was supposed to be a celebration. My younger sister, Ashley, stood beneath a delicate archway woven with white orchids, her smile beaming as she danced through candlelit tables in a gown that looked like it belonged in a royal museum. Dad was practically glued to her side, his laughter carrying over the soft music, a glass of scotch forever in his hand. I sat at the family table near the front, alone as always, swirling the ice in my watered-down drink. They hadn't saved a seat for me at the head table. Not that I was surprised. I watched Ashley toss her head back in laughter at something her new husband whispered, while I tucked a fraying thread back into the seam of my dress sleeve. It was the same pale blue dress I'd worn to 3 other weddings. I didn't care anymore. I hadn't bought something new for myself in years. When Dad finally walked over to me, his cologne hit first. Old leather, smoke, and something sharp beneath it. The same smell from when I was a little girl hiding behind the couch while he yelled at Mom. He leaned down, smiling wide for the guests still watching us like we were some charming family portrait. "Let's make this a real gift," he said, teeth gleaming like they could tear through me. "Give her the house, Sam." At first, I thought he was joking. I blinked. "Excuse me?" "You heard me." His voice dropped an octave, the warmth peeling away. "It's the right thing. You're doing well. Ashley needs a good place to start her marriage. You've had your time." "My home?" I said slowly, trying not to let the sting reach my voice. "You want me to just give it away?" His eyes narrowed. "Don't be selfish." Selfish. That word stung more than anything. It wasn't new. I'd heard it for years, always in moments when I tried to draw a boundary, say no, choose myself for once. I looked past him to Ashley, who was watching from across the room. She didn't wave. She didn't smile, just stared like she was waiting for me to fall in line, like I always did. I turned back to Dad. No. The word was so small, but the moment I said it, I felt everything shift, like the ground had tilted under us. His jaw clenched. "Don't do this here," he hissed. "Not tonight." I said no. I repeated louder this time. My hands were trembling, but I kept my voice even. "That house is mine. I bought it. I renovated it. I've worked. For everything I have. Ashley has." That was all I got out before the crystal cake stand came flying at me. I didn't see it until it was too late. 1 second he was standing there, the next his hand shot out and grabbed the heavy stand from beside the cake table. It glinted in the string lights as it sailed toward me, then smashed against my arm and exploded into the floor. The sound was deafening. A crack, then a sharp ringing in my ears. My drink spilled across the tablecloth. I stumbled backward, clutching my forearm where pain bloomed like fire. Silence. Every head turned. Someone gasped. A fork dropped. The string quartet stopped mid-note. And then the murmurs began, like rain on a tin roof. Whispered shock, half-choked disbelief, phones rising. I looked down. Blood. Not much, but enough to see against the pale blue fabric. I turned slowly, searching for Ashley in the crowd. She was standing now, still near the head table, her bouquet, limp in one hand. She looked right at me. She didn't move. Not toward me, not away. Her expression didn't even change. That somehow hurt worse than the impact. I'd bought her birthday presents she never remembered. Helped her through college. Applications she ignored. Paid her cell phone bill for years without ever being thanked. And now? Nothing. My father was being restrained by one of the groomsmen, hissing something I couldn't hear. Someone offered to call an ambulance. I waved them off. I wasn't going to collapse. Not here. not in front of them. Instead, I stood. I straightened, my shoulders, even as pain throbbed down my arm. "I'm fine," I said to no one and everyone. "I'll go." The wedding planner tried to stop me, babbling about statements and cleanup and insurance. I ignored her and walked barefoot across the lawn, heels in one hand, the other holding pressure to my arm. As I reached the valet stand, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirrored windows. There was blood on my sleeve, mascara streaking down my face, my hair windblown and wild. And yet, there was something different too, something in my eyes, a flicker, a break in the fog. For the first time in years, I wasn't trying to smile through it. I wasn't pretending. I was done pretending. And that was the beginning. When people tell stories about their childhood, there's usually a warmth to them, a kind of golden nostalgia, like an old photograph left too long in the sun. Mine feels more like tracing water stains on a ceiling, silent, shapeless, but always growing in the background. I was born second. Ashley came first, and with her came sparkle. Even as toddlers, she drew attention like perfume in a small room. She was the one people reached for in family photos, the one teachers doted on despite her never turning in homework. I learned early how to make myself smaller, useful, quiet. After Mom died, the silence in the house became unbearable. I was 19, one semester into my art degree. The call came just after I'd finished a charcoal study of hands, wrinkled, strong, like hers. Dad said the words flatly. "Your mother passed. You need to come home." No tears, no softness, just duty. I dropped out the next morning. There was no discussion. It felt inevitable, like a script I'd been handed long before I knew I was in a play. Ashley was 16, spiraling, throwing tantrums and skipping school. Dad checked out, physically present but emotionally vacant, always busy with paperwork, or calls that never seemed to end. So I stepped in. I made lists, cleaned the fridge, scheduled her doctor appointments, held her hair back when she threw up from drinking at 17. I became her shadow, her buffer, her quiet mother-shaped presence. And Dad, he offered nods, grunts of approval if I kept the chaos low enough to let him disappear behind his newspaper. That's how it began. The first time I truly realized I was invisible was the day I bought my house. I was 28. I'd saved for almost 6 years, working double shifts, living in a cramped studio with cracked tile and neighbors who played death metal at 2 a.m. The day I got my keys, I cried in the car. Not big sobs, just quiet, steady tears, like a faucet finally turned on. I invited them both over the next weekend. I cleaned for days, made lemon bars from Mom's old recipe. I even framed one of Ashley's high school photos. She hated it, but I loved her laugh in it. It looked real. They never came. Dad said something about a client lunch. Ashley texted me at midnight that night. "Sorry, girl, forgot LOL, next time, XOXO. There wasn't a next time." Still, I kept giving. Little things at first, helping her cover a missed rent payment, sending her grocery money when she was between jobs, co-signing on a car loan that she defaulted on within a year. Every time I said yes, it chipped away at me. But saying no, that felt like abandonment. Like I was undoing all the scaffolding I'd built to keep the family from falling apart after Mom was gone. Dad didn't see any of it. Or maybe he chose not to. He only praised Ashley, her new haircut, her creative, career detours, the boyfriends who came and went like weather. I got comments like, "You still painting? Thought you'd outgrow that phase," or "You should be more fun like your sister." When I painted late at night, alone. I never hung my work in the house. It didn't feel right, like displaying something that would only be judged, not seen. And then came the house. the one I turned from a neglected pile of bricks into something alive. The first time I walked through it, the wallpaper was peeling, and the kitchen smelled like mildew. But there was a bay window in the living room where I imagined curling up with tea on rainy mornings. A crooked staircase with steps that creaked like old memories. I loved it instantly. I poured everything into it. Scrubbing floors. Learning how to install cabinets from YouTube. Repainting walls late into the night with old t-shirts tied around my hair. When I finished, it felt like me. Like a part of myself I'd never been allowed to show anyone. No one in my family ever visited. Not even once. They didn't ask how it was going. Didn't answer when I sent progress photos. Ashley only texted once. "You still in that fixer house?" So rustic, lol. But they remembered the house when they needed something. Dad once called to ask if Ashley could crash there, just for a few weeks, after a breakup. That turned into 3 months, during which she didn't pay rent, threw parties, and borrowed my clothes without asking, then left without a thank you. I didn't say anything. I just scrubbed lipstick off the bathroom mirror and boxed up her leftover things. I told myself I didn't need their validation. That love didn't always come with acknowledgement. That some people just weren't good at showing up, but it didn't mean they didn't care. It took me longer than I want to admit to understand that sometimes people don't care. Or worse, they only care when you're useful. And I was useful. Always the helper. Always the responsible one. That label used to feel like a badge of honor. Now it feels like a trap. I was useful when it meant giving up school. Useful when it meant raising my sister. Useful when I let myself become an emotional sponge for everyone's messes. Even at that wedding, sitting in the shadows, watching Ashley glow in a gown Dad paid for, I told myself I was happy for her. I wanted to be. But when he asked for my house, when that crystal cake stand shattered across my arm, it was like a window cracked inside me. And through the crack, light came in. It lit up every moment I'd buried, every time I'd smiled through a wound, every time I'd said yes when what I really needed, what I never allowed myself to say, was no. I wasn't seen, not as a daughter, not as a sister, not as myself. But for the first time, I wasn't ashamed of that anymore. I was angry, and that was new. That was mine. I thought the silence after the wedding would feel like relief. Instead, it felt like exile. No texts, no calls. Not even a shallow apology. Just stillness. Cold, echoing stillness. I kept checking my phone those first few days, convincing myself that someone, anyone, would reach out. Maybe one of the aunts. Maybe Ashley with some awkward half-hearted explanation. Even Dad. But nothing came. Instead, on the 4th day, I got served. A formal letter, delivered to my door like a slap across the face. The envelope was stiff, printed with embossed lettering. It bore the name of a law firm I'd never heard before, one my father clearly had no trouble affording. Inside, it stated I was being strongly urged to reconsider my refusal to gift my home to Ashley and her husband, on moral grounds, on family, tradition, and under the suggestion that it was what our late mother would have wanted. They even cited a vague, cherry-picked clause from Mom's old estate notes, something about shared inheritance and equitable treatment. It wasn't binding. It wasn't even accurate. But it was enough to scare me, enough to make me feel like the ground beneath my feet was suddenly made of ice. And that wasn't the end of it. Logged into my bank account the next morning, just to feel some sense of control, and found 2 voicemails from my loan officer. Apparently, my father had contacted the bank. Claimed he was assisting with refinancing on my behalf. He'd tried to get access to information about my mortgage. Said I was looking to downsize. He was laying the groundwork. If I missed one payment, Just one. He could spin it. Suggest I was unstable. Maybe even petition for some kind of forced sale. A lawyer could twist a narrative. He knew that. He'd spent his whole life twisting stories into facts. And Ashley? She posted photos of the wedding all over social media. Sun-drenched smiles, a perfectly filtered video of her walking down the aisle. Every image curated like a magazine spread. Every shot precisely framed to crop me out. I saw my hand in one photo, just the edge of it, reaching for a champagne flute, and then nothing else. Cropped. Removed. It was as if I'd never been there. As if I never existed in their story. At work, I couldn't focus. My bruised arm ached when I typed, a dull throb beneath the fabric of my cardigan. My boss noticed my silence. My team looked at me with side-eyed concern, whispering when they thought I wasn't listening. I started, leaving early, then stopped going altogether. My house, my sanctuary, felt like a crime scene, and I was the suspect. Late one night, I pulled out the old photo box from the top of my closet, the one I hadn't opened in years, the one that smelled like dust and forgotten birthdays. I found the photo easily. It was always near the top. My mother, sitting on a faded picnic blanket in the park, holding both of us, Ashley on her left, me on her right. We must have been 5 and 8. Her face was radiant, windswept, half laughing. The sun caught the tiny gold pendant at her throat. I remember it clearly because I used to play with it when she tucked me in at night. I stared at that photo for a long time, until my vision blurred and the lines of our bodies melted into one. Then I crumpled. Right there, on the cold tile of the kitchen floor, clutching the photo like it might breathe life into me. I cried the way I hadn't let myself cry in years. Not quiet, not composed. Ugly, gasping sobs that came from some hidden, wounded animal inside me. "I'm sorry," I whispered to her. Again and again. "I'm sorry I let them do this. I'm sorry I gave everything and never asked why." But the floor didn't answer. The picture didn't change. Eventually, the sobs faded into a hollow quiet. I stayed there for hours. I don't even remember falling asleep. Just that when I woke, morning light was slipping through the blinds, and the house smelled like dust and lemon cleaner. I sat up slowly, photo still pressed to my chest. Something had shifted. It was small, barely perceptible. But I felt it. A crack in the fog. A thread of heat curling in my chest, right where the ache had lived for weeks. Maybe months. Maybe years. It wasn't rage. Not yet. It was refusal. A whisper in the back of my mind that said, no more. No more silence. No more apologies. No more walking barefoot across glass and calling it grace. They wanted to erase me? Then I'd make sure I was unerasable. I stood, brushed dust from my pajama pants, and placed the photo in a frame. It wasn't much, just a simple silver frame I'd kept in the junk drawer, originally meant for a certificate I never bothered. To hang. I set it on the mantel, my mother smiling, holding both her daughters, one who still smiled for cameras, and one who was finally waking up. I vanished. Not in the way people do in movies, with dramatic exits or passports slipped across borders, but in the quiet, invisible way women disappear every day. I took an indefinite leave from work, citing family issues. No one asked for details. They just nodded with that polite discomfort people have when you mention anything close to pain. I turned off my phone. I unplugged the landline. I stopped opening my email. The world became small, just the creak of my stairs, the hum of the fridge, the distant sound of birds outside my window. My house, my home, had always been a project, a never-ending list of things to fix or beautify. But now it was a refuge, A container for my grief, my rage, my unraveling. For a while, I just slept, on the couch mostly. Wrapped in a throw blanket my mother gave me when I turned 20. It was frayed at the edges, the kind of softness that only comes from years of being held. I kept a journal and a pile of photo albums beside me. Most nights, I would flip through them with half-lidded eyes, searching faces for answers. I let the garden grow wild. The lavender bushes burst into chaos, bees diving between the overgrowth. Dandelions took over the path I once kept so neatly, trimmed. I didn't mind. There was something honest about it, something alive. On the 10th morning, or maybe the 14th, I'd lost count, I walked out barefoot and fixed the loose railing on the front porch. It had been rattling in the wind for months. I tightened the bolts slowly, deliberately, like I was reclaiming the sound of my own footsteps. The next day, I repainted the guest bedroom. It had once been Ashley's when she stayed with me. She'd left behind a mess of cheap perfume bottles and old mascara wands. I boxed them all up and painted over the bubblegum pink with a soft shade of green. Sea glass, the label called it. It felt like peace. That same night, I found Mom's old lemon bread recipe tucked between 2 pages in one of her cookbooks. Her handwriting was neat, slanted, delicate. I followed the steps exactly. As the scent filled the kitchen, I felt her with me, not as a ghost, but as something cellular. Memory turned presence. I cried when I took the first bite. I wasn't sure why. It wasn't sadness, not really. It was more like recognition, like remembering who I used to be before everything got so tangled. The next evening, I did something brave. I reached out. Rachel had been my closest friend in college, an artist, like me, wild and intuitive, with a laugh that could crack walls. We hadn't spoken in almost 5 years. Life had pulled us apart. Or maybe I had. But I found her number scribbled in an old notebook and texted her. "Hi. It's Sam. I'm not okay. Are you free?" She showed up that same night with 2 bottles of wine and no questions. We sat on my back porch beneath the broken fairy lights I never got around to replacing. She didn't ask why my arm was still bruised, or why my eyes looked like they hadn't seen sleep in weeks. She just poured us each a glass and said, "God, I miss this place." We talked until after midnight, about nothing, about everything. About the way grief shapes you into someone else without warning. At one point, I admitted it out loud. "I think they want to take my house." She didn't flinch, just reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Then let's make sure they don't." The next morning, she sent me the number for a legal aid group that helped women with family property disputes. I made the call with trembling fingers. The woman who answered had a calm, low voice. She listened carefully. She didn't rush me. By the end of the call, I knew more than I had in weeks. Knew that the letter they sent me wasn't enforceable. Knew that my deed was solid. Knew that I had every right to push back. And that maybe, for the first time in my life, I could. That night, I stood barefoot in the living room and stared at the framed photo of Mom on the mantel. I lit a candle beneath it, one of the lavender-scented ones she used to keep in the bathroom. "I'm not giving it up," I whispered to her. "I'm not giving me up." I started writing everything down. Every memory, every email, every text Ashley sent about money. I collected screenshots, receipts, old voicemails. I pulled up my mortgage history and filed the counter-complaint with the legal team the next week. It wasn't vengeance. Not exactly. It was defense. A shield rising. A refusal to keep bleeding, just because I loved the people holding the knife. I stopped apologizing. When I made my lemon bread again, I left slices in little brown bags and tied them with string. I delivered them to the neighbors I used to wave at but never speak to. A single mother across the street. An elderly couple. Next door. A kid who always skateboarded on the sidewalk even though it made me nervous. Every time I handed someone a bag, they smiled like I'd given them more than sugar and citrus. And maybe I had. Maybe I was giving myself a new story. One, not built from sacrifice. One made of choice. There's a strange silence that settles after survival. It's not peace. Not quite. It's more like still water. Deep. Heavy. Waiting for the first ripple. That ripple came in the form of a box labeled Tax Docs 2006-2009, which had been sitting in my garage for years. I hadn't meant to go looking for ghosts. I was just organizing, cleaning, reclaiming space. But when I opened the box and saw the edge of a faded manila envelope tucked behind old utility bills, my breath caught. My mother's handwriting. Slanted, elegant, unmistakably hers. It was a copy of her will. My hands shook as I opened it, like they remembered a truth I hadn't let myself feel in years. There it was, clear as daylight, a line underlined twice. I wish for Samantha to inherit the family home, as recognition for her sacrifices and stability. Samantha, not Ashley. Me. That house. The one Dad sold just months after her funeral to cover costs. The one I never got to say goodbye to. I remembered the yellow door, the crooked hallway where my mother's favorite mirror hung, the blue-tiled bathroom where she'd hum while brushing my hair. He sold it and never said a word. Pocketed everything. Sat there in my garage, sunlight cutting through the dust, and felt something inside me ignite. Not just anger, clarity. I scanned every page, sent it to my lawyer, and began the fight. It wasn't just about my current home anymore. It was about my mother's wishes, her voice, the quiet love she had for me that even death hadn't erased. Just hidden, under paper and patriarchy. The next few weeks were a blur of spreadsheets, documents, digital folders with names like Evidence, MTG 2020, and Bank Overreach Talks email. I color-coded timelines. I wrote a timeline of every instance where my father and Ashley had tried to manipulate me. Emotional, legal, financial. It was all there, hiding in plain sight. And still, through it all, I felt the hum of something deeper. It started one rainy afternoon, the kind where the sky hangs heavy and low like a sigh. I pulled a blank canvas out of my storage closet. It was dusty, but still crisp. Still full of possibility. I hadn't painted in years. Not seriously. Not for me. I squeezed paint onto an old palette. Reds. Ochres. Black. Charcoal gray. I didn't plan it. I didn't sketch. I just felt. My hands moved like they'd never forgotten. Like they were translating everything I couldn't say into color. Raw strokes, thick textures, layers of emotion. No composition rules. No pretty faces or flowers. When I stepped back, I saw her. A silhouette, feminine, faceless, cracking out of the frame of a crumbling house. Fire burst behind her like wings. It was chaotic, messy, imperfect. It was perfect. I framed it the next day and hung it above the mantel, just beside the photo of my mother with her arms around Ashley and me. The painting glowed in the late afternoon, light, like something sacred. I called it Reckoning. Rachel came over for wine that weekend and stopped mid-sentence when she saw it. "Jesus, Sam," she whispered. This is you." And for the first time in years, I felt seen. Not for what I'd done, or given, or swallowed, but for what I was. The next morning, on impulse, I took a photo of the painting and posted it online. Just the painting. No caption. I forgot about it within an hour, until it went viral. By evening, I had hundreds of messages. Some from strangers telling me it made them cry. Some from women saying they'd never felt so understood. A few from art collectors. But one message stopped me cold. It was from a small gallery downtown. They wanted to feature me in a women's resilience exhibit. Said my work was visceral, feminine rage molded into visual poetry. I laughed out loud when I read it, then cried. Because that's exactly what it was. I spent the next few weeks painting like I was exhaling years of silence. Each canvas became a chapter of my life. My erasure, my grief, my awakening. I painted until my fingers cramped, until I forgot to check the time. I named them Inheritance, Silencing Ceremony, The Second Daughter, House of Number Bloodline. Each one held a piece of me. Meanwhile, the legal proceedings were underway. My lawyer, Maria, was a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s with a dry wit and a steel backbone. She took one look at the documents I had gathered and said, "They've messed with the wrong woman." She filed not only the defense to block any transfer of deed, but a formal complaint challenging the original estate handling. It would take time, months, maybe longer, but it was already more than I'd ever believed I could do. I wasn't doing this to hurt them. I was doing it to stop hurting myself. I started sleeping through the night, eating real meals. I bought new bed sheets, not out of necessity, but because I liked the color. I wore my mother's perfume for the first time in years. Just one spritz on my wrists. It smelled like her hugs, like Sunday mornings, like not being afraid. I kept the lemon bread recipe framed in the kitchen now. I added a note beneath it in my own handwriting. "You are not selfish for surviving." Rachel cried when she saw it. My house, my home, wasn't just a shelter anymore. It was mine. From the cracked tile in the laundry room to the hummingbird feeder I hung outside the kitchen window. Every inch of it echoed with my voice. And that voice? It was getting louder. I wasn't done yet. I was just getting started. It's funny how life brings you full circle. Same venue, same ballroom, same chandeliers, but this time, the spotlight was mine. The last time I stood in this place, I walked out with blood on my sleeve and silence burning in my throat. Tonight, I stood on the stage of a charity gala, wearing a crisp white suit with gold cufflinks that used to belong to my grandfather. They'd sat in a box in my closet for years, until I decided I was allowed to wear strength. The room had changed, or maybe I had. Instead of wedding toasts and clinking glasses, the air buzzed, with a different kind of reverence. The exhibit, Reckoning, The Art of Silent Daughters, had been a success beyond anything I'd imagined. Every piece had sold. Articles had been written. A segment had aired on public television. The whispers that used to haunt me now haunted them. I caught sight of them just before stepping up to the podium. Dad and Ashley, sitting stiffly near the back. Ashley looked flawless, as always, polished and hollow, wearing a dress far too expensive for someone who claimed she was struggling. Dad wore his favorite gray suit, the one with the pocket square that he used to only wear for court or funerals. They looked smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I was finally standing at my full height. The event organizer nodded toward me, and I approached the microphone. A hush fell over the room. Glasses stopped clinking. Conversations paused. I let the silence settle for a second. Let it breathe. Then I spoke. When I was a little girl, I began, my voice low but steady. I believed love meant being quiet. That to be loved, I had to be easy, accommodating, useful. That to matter, I had to sacrifice. A few people nodded. A woman in the front row wiped at her eye. But over time, I continued, I learned something else. That silence isn't peace. That sacrifice isn't love. And that value, real value, has nothing to do with how much you give away to be allowed to stay. I glanced toward the back. Dad didn't move. Ashley crossed her arms tighter across her chest. I'm honored to stand here tonight, I said. Not because I proved something to anyone else, but because I finally stopped trying to. I stopped apologizing for needing space, for owning my voice, for refusing to be erased. I paused, breathing in the quiet. This isn't a toast to pain, or betrayal, or revenge. This is a toast to reclamation. To every woman who's ever been asked to disappear quietly. To every daughter who was told to sit down, be still, and hand over what she built. I lifted the champagne glass they'd handed me before I went up. To those of us who stayed, who endured, and finally, who said, no more. Applause rippled across the room. Not thunderous, not explosive, just honest, raw. A rising wave of quiet agreement, the kind that lands somewhere deep. I stepped down from the stage, and the event organizer squeezed my hand. That was stunning, she whispered. Reporters surged forward. Microphones, cameras, flashes. I answered a few questions, smiled for a few photos. I could feel them still watching me, from the back, Ashley and Dad, but I didn't look. Not yet. I made my way toward the gallery wall where Reckoning now hung in a gold frame. People stood in front of it, murmuring, snapping photos. My name etched in the corner plaque felt both surreal and utterly right. Then I felt him approach. Dad. His voice came from behind me. Low, measured, still pretending he had control. We need to talk. I turned slowly, looked him full in the face for the first time since the wedding. His eyes were tight, not angry, not contrite, just controlled, like always. The man who never yelled in public but crushed people in quiet corners. There's nothing left to say, I said. You humiliated us, he said flatly, all over the news, in your work. I told the truth, I replied. It was your version of the truth. I took a breath, steady and deep. Mom left me the house, I said. You sold it anyway. You tried to take this one from me too. You filed false reports. You let her, I nodded toward Ashley, walk all over me for years. And you called it love. He flinched, barely. I was protecting the family, he said. I laughed, not cruelly, just quietly. The way you laugh when the absurdity finally lands. You were protecting your control, I said. Your story, your legacy. He looked at me then, really looked. And maybe, just for a second, he saw it. The line he crossed. The daughter he lost. I stepped forward, not to challenge, but to close. I don't owe you my life anymore. His jaw clenched. I stepped back, turned. Ashley tried to speak as I passed her. Sam, she said. But I didn't stop. I didn't need whatever half-scripted guilt trip she had practiced in the mirror. I walked out into the night. Cool air wrapped around me like an exhale. Rachel stood on the sidewalk with her coat slung over one arm. She grinned when she saw me. You okay? I nodded. Yeah, I said. Actually, I am. We walked down the street together, past gallery lights and shuttered shops. I glanced up at the sky, clear, open, endless. There were still things, unresolved. Legal hearings to come, interviews, healing. But something in me had changed. The girl who once apologized for taking up space now stood tall beneath a sky that no longer felt out of reach. And the house, the one I refused to give away, waited for me at the end of the street, home mine, always.